They say winter storms do not just test the wood stacked by your door, they test the silence you carry inside. Thomas Rayburn knew silence well. At 73, tucked away in his weathered log cabin, he had learned to live with it, to sharpen blades he didn't need just to fill the hours. Outside, the storm shrieked like a restless ghost across the mountains, snow piling high against windows and doors. Inside, the stove flickered, steady and warm. Then came the sound, a faint knock, then another, hesitant, weak. Thomas froze, knife still in hand. The storm was wild enough to drive animals close to human doors, but this sound carried intent. Slowly, with stiff joints, he set the blade aside and moved to the window. His palm brushed away frost, revealing nothing but white chaos, until a figure wavered into view. A woman, small, bent against the wind, clutching something to her chest. The knock came again. Her voice barely reached him through the howl of snow. "Hello." Thomas hesitated only a moment before opening the door. Cold punched through the cabin. Snow whipped inside. The woman stumbled forward, her coat soaked, scarf frozen to her face, hair tangled with ice. She looked near collapse, her hands shaking as she clung to a dripping handbag. I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't know where else to go." Thomas studied her. Wrinkles lined her face, carved by something deeper than years. Her eyes, wide, desperate, carried shame and need all at once. He stepped aside. "Come in." She obeyed, half falling past the threshold. He shut the door behind her, sealing out the storm. For the first time in months, another breath joined his in the quiet room. Thomas helped her to a chair by the stove. She sank into it, shoulders drooping, as though her frame could no longer bear her. Without words, he knelt, unzipped her boots, and wrapped her feet in a dry towel. Her socks were paper thin, her skin chilled to blue. He set the boots near the fire. "I didn't mean to intrude," she murmured. "You didn't," he replied, voice flat but not unkind. Her lips trembled as she spoke again. "I lost control of my car, slid into a ditch on Route 12, tried to walk, but the snow—" Her voice cracked. "It just kept coming." He handed her water, and she drank like someone who hadn't trusted herself to ask. "I'm Clara. Clara Monroe." He gave one slow nod. "Thomas." She looked around the small room, the shelf of tins and beans, the folded quilt on the couch, the stove that was both heart and hearth. "I didn't think anyone still lived this far out." "Most don't." He cooked a simple soup, the scent of chicken and barley filling the air. When he placed a bowl before her, her eyes brimmed. "Thank you." Thomas said nothing, just sat across from her, gaze steady on the fire. She breathed slow and uneven, but calmer now. Her eyes lifted to the mantel where a photograph rested, of a young man in uniform by a military truck. "Army?" she asked softly. Thomas's jaw tightened before he gave a single nod. "Long time ago." "My husband served too, Navy. He passed away last spring." Her voice trembled, then softened into a smile. "He was the strong one. I worried about everything. He used to say, 'Clara, the world won't end if I forget my keys.'" Thomas's mouth twitched almost into a smile. He poked the fire. "How long were you married?" 41 years. She swallowed. "That's all easy, but they were ours." His hand lingered near the flames before he drew it back. "That's a long time." She studied him. "Did you have someone?" "No, not for a long time." The silence that followed was no longer heavy. It was honest. The storm howled outside, but inside the two of them sat in stillness, warming hands over the same flame. For the first time that night, neither felt like a stranger. By midnight, Clara had drifted asleep on the couch, wrapped in the thick cabin quilt. Her breathing had steadied, but Thomas sat rigid in his chair, eyes fixed on the fading glow of embers. It had been years since another presence had crossed his threshold. Years since silence was broken by anything but wind and wood. Loneliness had been predictable, safe. Yet the woman asleep in his cabin stirred something he had long buried. A cough snapped him from thought. Sharp, dry. He rose quickly, moving to her side. Her forehead felt warm, her lips pale. He fetched water, dropped in peppermint leaves from a jar, and held the steaming mug out. "Drink this," he said quietly. Clara blinked awake, took the mug with trembling hands. A faint smile touched her lips. Still playing medic, huh? His expression barely changed. Used to be. Her gaze shifted toward the shadows, where an old metal trunk rested against the wall. Its corners were dented, the lock scratched, but its weight filled the room even from a distance. That yours? She asked. Thomas hesitated. Finally, he dragged it forward and lifted the lid. Inside lay remnants of a past he rarely touched, folded fatigues, a battered canteen, photographs of young men before a helicopter, medals wrapped in cloth. Clara reached in gently, her fingers brushing a small case. She opened it, revealing a purple heart. Hero stuff, she whispered. Thomas shook his head. That's just paperwork. No, she said firmly, holding it with reverence. That's surviving what others didn't. Silence pressed between them, heavier than the storm outside. His jaw tightened, but in his eyes something shifted, like a locked door creaked an inch open. Clara set the metal down, her own voice dropping to a fragile thread. My husband had one too. He kept it tucked away, said the real award was coming home. Thomas exhaled slowly, a sound almost like surrender. He fetched another blanket, draped it over her shoulders with trembling hands. She closed her eyes, leaning into the warmth not just of cloth, but of care she hadn't expected. For years, no one had asked about his past, let alone looked into it without turning away. For years, she had carried grief in silence, unsure if anyone could understand the hollowness left behind. Now, in the flicker of firelight, both burdens felt less unbearable. Clara's hand lingered on the trunk as though she had touched something sacred. Thomas sat back, his shoulders tense, yet lighter somehow. Outside, the storm beat against the windows. Inside, the silence deepened. But it was not empty. It was shared. And as the fire cracked, the man who had lived alone for decades realized that someone had finally seen him. And the woman who had nearly given up found herself sheltered not only from snow, but from despair. The storm broke before dawn. When Thomas stepped outside, his boots crunched into drifts of white that shimmered under the pale sky. The mountains, smothered hours ago, now stood sharp and silent, the world remade in snow. He breathed deeply, the air crisp, cutting, alive. Inside, Clara had risen. She sat at the small table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee she had found and brewed herself. Her cheeks carried more color, her voice steadier. She wore one of his old flannel shirts over her clothes, sleeves too long, shoulders broad, but she looked warmer than the night before. I found the coffee, she said, almost shy. Hope you don't mind. Not at all. She smiled, different from the fragile attempt of the night before, and this one reached her eyes, carved lines of light across her face. It's strong, Midong, she added. That's how it's supposed to be. They sat across from each other as morning filtered through frosted glass. Silence stretched, but it no longer felt like emptiness. It was weight, fullness, the kind shared between people who had already seen each other at their rawest. Clara traced the rim of her mug with one finger before speaking again. For months, I've been waking to a house that doesn't sound like him anymore. Just clocks ticking, radiators humming. No voice, no footsteps. He used to whistle, her breath caught. Never the same tune twice. The quiet used to be beautiful. Now it's just cold. Thomas lifted his eyes from his coffee. He didn't speak, only nodded, but the look in his gaze told her he understood more than words could hold. My husband used to tell me the world is still kind, if you look hard enough. Maybe he was right, Thomas said. Her smile softened, steadier this time, touched by both grief and hope. By mid-morning, Clara stood at the cabin door, coat pulled close. The road stretched below, blanketed in white, bends hidden under the snow. I should head back, she said quietly, if the road's clear. Thomas joined her on the porch, scanning the bend. Plow won't come up here until tomorrow, maybe longer. She sighed, the sound carrying weariness deeper than fatigue. Of course. Your car's still down the hill? She nodded. In a ditch. Battery's probably dead. Thomas moved toward his shed, the old hinges groaning as he pulled tools free. After a while, he returned, wiping his hands on a rag. Axle's cracked. Even if we haul it out, it won't run. Clara tightened her coat, eyes downcast. Then after a pause, her voice trembled. Maybe I was supposed to find this place. Thomas turned, brow lifted. I mean, she hesitated. I've been angry a long time at the world, at him, at myself, and yesterday, walking in that storm, I thought maybe I wouldn't make it. I didn't even care. She met his eyes. But I knocked, and someone answered. He didn't reply immediately. His gaze held hers, steady, unflinching, as if he saw all the weight behind her words. Maybe, he said at last. The road brought us both somewhere we needed to be. Clara gave a faint laugh, half breath, half sob. You always talk like that. No, he answered, just when it matters. The snow glittered under a pale sun. Birds cut through the stillness, their wings scattering the silence that had pressed on both of them for too long. In that moment, neither storm nor distance nor grief felt insurmountable. What began as survival had become something else. Two lives meeting at the edge of loss and discovering, unexpectedly, warmth that neither thought remained. 2 weeks later, the snow had retreated from the porch steps, earth showing in patches where ice once lay. Morning birds sang faintly in the trees, their call small but enough to make the hills feel alive again. Thomas walked down to his rusted mailbox, a habit more than expectation. For years, it had yielded nothing but emptiness. Today, however, an envelope rested inside, handwritten, the loops and lines of the letters familiar. He carried it back into the cabin, set it on the table, and stared at it for a long moment before opening. Dear Thomas, I made it back safely. The roads opened the day after you said they would, and the tow company dragged my car out, though it's beyond repair. That doesn't matter. I've started volunteering at the VA center. Silence had been closing in around me, and it was time to step outside it. You were right. Kindness has to go somewhere, or it disappears. She had enclosed a photograph. The two of them stood side by side outside the cabin, the mountains rising behind them. Clara's smile lit her whole face while Thomas, unsmiling as ever, carried in his eyes a life that had been dormant too long. At the bottom, one last line waited. Your fire didn't just warm my hands, it gave me a reason to feel again. Thomas folded the letter slowly, slid it into his coat pocket, and sat down before the hearth. The fire hissed, steady as always, yet something within it had changed. He moved to the mantel, lifting the photograph from the envelope. For a long while he studied the two figures. Then he set it down beside the medals he had once kept buried, allowing it to stand among the remnants of a past he no longer needed to hide. Memory and presence, loss and renewal, side by side. The morning stretched long and quiet. He poured 2 cups of coffee without thinking, one for himself, one for the empty space across the table. When he realized what he had done, he did not put the second cup away. Instead, he placed it carefully before the other chair, letting it sit, not as absence but as company. The fire cracked, warm against the silence. Yet the silence was different now, no longer suffocating, no longer sharp. It carried weight, but it also carried presence. Through the window, the forest opened in soft color where snow had melted back. A deer stood at the tree line, still as stone, its breath rising in the cool air. It watched him through the glass, unafraid. Thomas met its gaze, nodded once, a quiet recognition between two creatures who understood solitude and survival. He reached for Clara's letter again, smoothing it flat across his hands. The words echoed not just in his mind, but in his chest, a rhythm steady and unfamiliar after so many years of silence. Your fire didn't just warm my hands, it gave me a reason to feel again. Thomas tucked the letter away, looked out at the pale light sliding between branches, and let the quiet sit with him. No storm, no shouting wind, no chaos, only a calm that was neither empty nor cold. Sometimes shelter goes both ways. And in that truth, Thomas found a kind of warmth that no winter could ever take from him. This story reminds us that even in the harshest storms, there are moments when doors open, when silence softens, when kindness draws us back to feeling. Loneliness may seem safer than pain, but connection transforms both. If this story touched you, share your thoughts, follow for more, and let's keep kindness alive in every heart.